Here is my new tool, the pun counter. I'll be using it to help introduce my other new tool, which is mostly based on swan puns and math. I call it
the Swanalizer.
So how does it work, you ask? Well, it analyzes my speech for potential swan puns and keeps a tally of the good ones, only counting each unique pun once. Oh, you mean the Swanalizer? Oh, sorry. Okay, well, SOANS, pronounced swans, stands for Simplified Observation Analysis System. The Swanalizer is the first tool that is a part of Swans, but I will be adding more tools and features over time, and I'll be making the new features work better with my existing tools in case we want to go from a simple analysis to something more in-depth. The Swanalizer is a good starting point for people who are a little more swanal about their observations, but don't want to spend a bunch of time analyzing them. Here's how the Swanalizer works. First, it needs an image. This should be full frame uncropped from the original source. For now, only 1920 by 1080 images will work properly. HD video captures are perfect for this. Let's go ahead and capture a frame from my recent Black Swan video. I've added a Swanalize button to make it easier. What? It counts. Swanalizer and Swanalize are different words. Oh, and I should mention that the Swanalizer is only really useful for observations where the horizon appears a visually significant amount higher than the closer land. Now we bring up the tool and load the image for proper Swanalysis. First, we have to give some minimal information about what we are looking at. We need to know the horizontal field of view of the image. This depends on the focal length or zoom level of the camera at the time of the observation. I'll do a video soon explaining how you can determine your camera's field of view at different zoom levels, and there are other ways of determining the field of view from the image if you don't know how far you are zoomed in. Also, if you are always zoomed in to the max optical zoom on your camera, without going into digital zoom at all, then it will always be the same field of view for all those shots, so you only need to figure it out once. My camera, for example, has a field of view of 0.8 degrees horizontal when at full 90 times zoom, which I generally only use for full zoom shots so I don't have to calculate the field of view each time. The field of view is usually the hardest thing to determine. The rest is easy. Next, we input the distance to the closest land that we are seeing the water past, in meters. Then we input the distance to the most distant known target. This can be the horizon. If there's only one close target in a horizon, then you need to estimate the horizon distance. I'll explain how to best do that later, but in this case I know the distance to the next shoreline, so I will enter that value. Alright, so all we need now is our observer height above the surface we are looking across. Easy enough. I know my elevation was no more than a foot for this particular part of the observation. Now all we need to do is drag to move the base of the swan so that it lines up with the base of the close land in the image. Then we pull the swan's head until it matches the apparent horizon and hit the Swanalize button. That's it. Couldn't be any swimpler. Swimpler? No, that doesn't work. Anyway, now we can view the results. The program measures the angle between the swan's head and body. This angle is officially called the swangle, or swangle if you prefer. The swangle represents a distance of the water surface we are seeing past the close land. So what determines the swangle? Let's look at a model quickly and then we'll get back to the observation. If we look at a geometric flat Earth model with two targets of different distances, we can see that as we lower the camera, the swangle gets smaller and smaller. From very low elevations, the swangle can't even be discerned from the base of the close land, even at full zoom. And of course on a globe we would almost never have a swangle unless we were high enough up, but then the geometric horizon would be expected to be farther away, and therefore not a good black swan observation. So when we have an observation where geometrically we shouldn't have a big enough swongle to see on flat Earth, and definitely no swongle on the globe, then we know the light traveling from the water surface to our eye must be bending down to some degree. When the light bends down even slightly over distance, we see that bend as upward displacement. This effectively stretches out the shallow angle to the distant water. Using the size of the swongle and the other input values, the Swanalyzer can determine the approximate strength of refraction required on either model in order to produce the image. This is swantified as the ray radius and is displayed here. Each model would require a different radius in order to produce the same observation. The smaller the ray radius, the stronger the refraction required to produce that radius. Then, working backward from that with an idea of the strength of refraction, the program predicts where the underlying geometry would actually be relative to the image for either model. So we can see that the farther we are seeing this apparent horizon, and the bigger the swongle, the more refraction would be needed to make this observation work on either model, but especially the globe. And remember how I said the apparent horizon distance isn't super important? That's because we are already limited in viewing angle to the distant surface, and the light is bending down, causing interference with the rays above that are not bending down quite as much. We see this difference in rate of bending as vertical compression. The Swanalyzer doesn't tell you what all the rays are doing, just what the lowest rays need to be doing. Then the compression can be replicated with changes to the refraction gradient over elevation, and we can do this outside of the Swanalyzer tool. I'm also working on a tool to sort of decompress these Black Swan observations to get a better idea of the overall gradient required without as much trial and error. The thing is, anytime we have a visual swongle like this, we know the Earth has a concave-ish appearance, which means greater than infinite over 6R refraction, or greater than circulating rays. But how much greater? The swongle determines that. We can play around with different values to get an idea, but the main thing is, if refraction bends light in arcs over distance, then these arcs need to be considerably tighter on the globe model in order to produce the same image versus a flat model. So I think that's a pretty good basic introduction to the Swanalyzer. I still have some testing and tweaking to do, and then I will make a more technical video if anyone's interested. Once I know it's working perfectly, I'll start Swanalyzing all of my Black Swans and the more well-known community Black Swans and presenting some short videos. If you want to submit any observations for Swanalysis, just make sure you have the 4 pieces of information required, and I can easily make a short video about your observation and add it to the ranks. And if anything wasn't clear in this video as to how the Swanalyzer works, leave a comment and I'll try to answer your questions as best I can. Alright, thanks for swanching.